Picture this. It's 11 o'clock at night. You just got off a phone call that left your chest tight. Your mind is spinning. Your thoughts are loud, and nothing feels okay. So you do the only thing that makes sense. You start cleaning, not because the apartment is dirty, not because you plan to, but because something inside you just needed to move, to sort, to scrub. And 30 minutes later, the kitchen is spotless, the floor is swept, and you feel, just slightly, like you can breathe again. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And you're definitely not weird. There is a very specific type of person who reaches for a mop instead of a phone call when life gets overwhelming. And for a long time, people around them couldn't figure out why. Even they couldn't always explain it. It just felt necessary. It felt like the only thing that made sense in that moment. But here's what nobody tells you about why you actually do this. It's not about the mess. It never really was. Your brain is doing something incredibly sophisticated when you clean under stress. And once you understand what it's actually doing, you'll never look at this habit the same way again. There's a psychological concept called behavioral activation. The idea that physical movement can interrupt a spiral of anxious thought by redirecting the brain's attention toward a concrete, completable task. When your mind is flooded with problems that have no immediate solution, your nervous system starts searching for something, anything, it can actually finish, and cleaning is perfect for that. You start with a pile, you end with a clear surface. The problem has a beginning, a middle, and an end. In a life that sometimes feels like nothing ever resolves, that completion loop is deeply, almost chemically, satisfying. Think about it this way. When you're stressed, your cortisol levels spike. Your body enters a low-grade version of fight or flight. Your brain is scanning for threats, for things to fix, for ways to regain control. Cleaning gives the brain a legitimate outlet for that energy. You're not suppressing the stress. You're metabolizing it through action. Here's the part that most people miss about that cortisol spike. Cortisol isn't just a stress chemical. It's an action chemical. It evolved to make you move, to hunt, to run, to build. When modern stress activates it, and there's nowhere to run and nothing to hunt, your body still needs somewhere to put that energy. Physical cleaning, the repetitive motion, the visible progress, the muscle engagement, provides exactly the kind of output cortisol was designed to fuel. Your body isn't malfunctioning. It found a solution. And there's a dopamine piece to this too. Every time you complete a small cleaning task, wipe the counter, fold the shirt, clear the sink, your brain releases a small hit of dopamine, the reward chemical, the one that says, you did something, it counts. In a day where nothing felt like it counted, that matters more than it sounds. Your brain is essentially rewarding itself in real time for bringing order to chaos. And it remembers that. It builds an association. Stress arrives, cleaning follows, relief comes, which is part of why you reach for it again the next time things fall apart. Psychologists call this environmental regulation, using your physical surroundings to manage your internal emotional state. It's not avoidance, it's not a quirk, it's a real documented strategy that your nervous system developed because it works. And here's where it gets interesting. Research on sensory processing sensitivity suggests that people who are more attuned to their environments are also more likely to feel disturbed by disorder. For them, a cluttered space doesn't just look messy. It feels loud. It adds to the cognitive load that's already overwhelming them. Cleaning, then, isn't just about control. It's about reducing sensory noise so the brain can finally hear itself think. That's not obsessive. That's your nervous system asking for order in a world that won't give it. But it goes even deeper than that, because not everyone who cleans when they're stressed is doing it for the same reason. And understanding which type you are might be the most useful thing you take away from this. The first type is what we'll call the control architect. This is the person who, when everything around them feels uncertain, creates order, as a way of asserting agency. The job situation is unclear. The relationship is complicated. The future is foggy. But this shelf they can control. The act of organizing is a direct psychological response to powerlessness. It's the brain saying, I cannot fix the big thing, but I can fix this small thing. And sometimes, that's enough to keep going. You'll recognize the control architect because they don't just clean when stressed, they reorganize. The drawer that was already functional gets restructured. The bookshelf gets alphabetized at midnight. It's not about cleanliness, it's about architecture, about building something that will hold still when everything else won't. The second type is the sensory regulator. For this person, cleaning is less about control and more about calm. A messy environment isn't just aesthetically unpleasant, it's genuinely overstimulating. Their nervous system is already at capacity from whatever stress they're carrying, and the visual clutter is like background static that won't turn off. Cleaning removes the noise. It's not a coping mechanism so much as a reset button, one that clears the external environment so the internal one has room to breathe. Think about the last time you walked into a clean room after a hard day and felt your shoulders drop. That involuntary release, that's the sensory regulator's entire motivation. They're not cleaning the room. They're lowering the volume on a world that got too loud. Most people watching this are quietly nodding at one of these types. Some won't admit it out loud, but you can, in the comments, just drop the type. One word is enough. I read every single one. The third type is the emotion displacer. This one is a little harder to see in yourself. For this person, cleaning functions as a substitute for the emotional processing they don't yet have access to. The grief is too big. The anger is too sharp. The anxiety is too formless to confront directly. So instead of sitting with the feeling, they move. They clean, they organize, they create visible, measurable progress in a situation where their actual emotions feel like they're going nowhere. The result is a very clean house and a feeling that's been postponed but not resolved. The emotion displacer often cleans in silence, alone, with an intensity that doesn't quite match the task, because the task was never really the task. Let me ask you something. Think about the last time you stress cleaned. Was the feeling that came after actually peace? Or was it more like exhaustion, a temporary quiet that didn't last? Because that's the edge where this behavior lives. For many people, it genuinely helps. The movement processes the cortisol, the completion loop soothes the nervous system, and they come out the other side a little steadier. But there's a darker side to this that most people never acknowledge. For some, the cleaning becomes a way of running. Not from the mess on the floor, but from the mess inside. And the way to tell the difference is whether you feel better after or whether you just feel like cleaning again. Imagine you're sitting there after the last drawer is organized, the last surface is wiped down, the house is perfect, and somehow you still feel it. That low hum of something unfinished that has nothing to do with the countertops. That's the moment that matters. Not the cleaning itself, but what you find on the other side of it. Sometimes that feeling has been around much longer than you realize. Sometimes it goes all the way back. There's often a history behind this behavior that people don't talk about. A lot of people who stress clean grew up in environments where things felt genuinely out of control. Homes where the emotional weather was unpredictable, where you couldn't fix the big things, where the tension between the adults in the room was something you absorbed but couldn't name. And somewhere along the way, you figured out that while you couldn't fix the people, you could fix the space. You could make something small and specific neat and safe. That wasn't just a coping mechanism. That was a child building the only kind of shelter they had access to. And that child grew up. But the nervous system kept the memory. So now when life gets loud again, when the cortisol spikes and the helplessness creeps in, the body goes back to the thing that once worked. Back to the one place where effort and result were directly connected. Back to the drawer, the countertop, the floor. Back to the only place that ever felt like enough. And if that landed somewhere tender, If something in that just described someone you know, or a version of yourself you hadn't quite named before, that's the part worth sitting with. You're not broken. You're not controlling. You're not avoiding life. You're doing what generations of overwhelmed nervous systems have always done, reaching for the one thing that feels manageable when everything else doesn't. You're not controlling your environment. You're trying to quiet the noise inside your own head. And for a long time, that was the only tool you had. Of course you still reach for it. That's not a flaw. That's survival. That's one of the most human things there is. And maybe, now that you can see it clearly, you can also give yourself a little more grace for it. If this felt like someone finally put words to something you've carried quietly for a long time, subscribe. This is your place now. Because the next one might be the piece you've been missing. The next video is going to hit differently. Click it when you're ready. I'll see you there.